But we're here tonight to dedicate our new home and to honor specifically those people whose name we have chosen to place on the new home, which is Reed House, to honor Charlotte and Alan Walker Reed. So I'd like to ask Bruce and Susan now to share a little bit about Alan and Charlotte.
Hello, time binders. For those of you who may not be so familiar with time binder or time binding, it's a term that was originated by Krugevsky in his first book, Manhood of Humanity, which was published in 1921. And he basically, out of that book and the theory that he was trying to create, which was a foundation for what he was looking for, a science of humanity, he felt he needed to come up with a definition of what makes humans different from other critters that live on this wonderful planet. And he came up with the notion of time binding. That was the term he used. As time binders, we humans build on the values that others, human beings, have created before us. And based on that, we create our own values that we can pass on to others. When we recognize this process, when we remember to give thanks to the time binders who came before us, this makes us more conscious time binders. And having that consciousness can make a difference. Today, we're officially opening and dedicating Reed House, the new home for the Institute of General Semantics. And Reed House is named for two of the most important time binders in the history of general semantics, Charlotte Shushark Reed and Alan Walker Reed. Let us remember them now.
We're talking about starting out here in the Reed House, and I want to take you back to the Reeds themselves, starting with their home. A number of people here who never met Charlotte and Alan and have heard so much about them asked me this weekend, what is it about them? What was it about Charlotte that everybody keeps saying, oh, wonderful? Well, as you know, as general semanticists, it's difficult to convey in words, and perhaps especially about them because there was just such a feeling of warmth and helping and goodness and civility and so forth. It was just very, very special quality. About where they lived. They lived in Manhattan on Claremont Avenue in housing that was Columbia University housing. Alan had been a professor there. They lived on the second floor. Of course, there was an elevator. But there was also a circular staircase that went up from the lobby, down again, the marble stairs, well trodden. And for a good part of his life, Alan's joy was going down those stairs, and when he got to the bottom, just swinging around. And he very much regretted as he got older, and he held on with that for a long time, that he could no longer do that. He had to take the elevator. So they were on the second floor. The building was very old. I don't know how old, but wonderful Upper West Side old building. And you walk in and just surrounded by, I guess you could say culture, but books, dictionaries galore, as you can imagine, paintings, wonderful objects, magazines, newspapers, piled all over the place. It was a bane for Charlotte. Alan didn't like to get rid of any Charlotte used as her office the dining room of this apartment. It had old chests of drawers where she had records and things like that, as well as accumulation of other things. Lots of file cabinets, and kind of not center stage, it was off to the side, was her small desk and her old Royal typewriter. She never stopped using that old Royal typewriter. you know, the type is distinctive, and you always think exceptions from Charlotte. But despite that, she got a fax machine, she got a copy machine, and she did keep up with things. Alan's office was small. It was loaded with file cabinets. I mean, I don't know how deep they were, but there was a very narrow path. At the end of that path was a window and Alan's desk. And that's all you could see besides file cabinets. And he did all of this. He was surrounded by this accumulation of decades and decades and decades of scholarship. But of course, not all the file cabinets could fit in there. There were Charlotte's in the dining room. There were file cabinets in the bedroom. There were file cabinets. There was a so-called maid's room. This is an old apartment. There were file cabinets in the maid's room, and so forth. I just want to talk a little bit about the dinners there. Charlotte was a wonderful cook. She was very particular. Alan loved to help. He got very frustrated if he wasn't allowed to do something. And she would just make these wonderful meals, and we would have so much fun talking, of course, and having these meals, usually with wine. And Charlotte liked her bottle of ale before dinner. This was fairly routine. And all that was very lovely and informal. When she got to the point where she couldn't cook, we had Chinese takeout. The Chinese takeout, like you probably have never had, because she would get it in the afternoon, she would put it into pots when it was time for dinner, and she would heat it all up, and she would put it in the same lovely china that we had had all those wonderful home-cooked meals, and serve it that way, and it was really a treat. That gives you a little sense of just the experience of being there.
I'm going to give a little bit of history first about Charlotte and how she got involved with the Institute of General Semantics. As far as I know, it was actually in 1939 that Charlotte became an employee of the Institute in Chicago. She was born in Wisconsin, I believe in Milwaukee, in 1909, and she had studied dance, received a BA in zoology and physical education at the University of Wisconsin, and received a master's in education at the University of Chicago. And when she met Krzyzewski in 1936, Krzyzewski and his wife Mira had just moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Charlotte at that time was the secretary of the mathematics department at MIT. And she came in contact with Krzyzewski. And over the next few years, he had started to give seminars in various parts of the United States. And she attended a number of seminars. After the Institute was founded in 1938, the next following year, she was invited to work at the Institute as Krzyzewski's personal assistant, basically. And she soon became an irreplaceable co-worker, an editor, decision maker, advisor of Krzyzewski and Kendig, who was the assistant director. And after the Institute moved to Connecticut in 1946, and until Krzyzewski's death in 1950, she also helped the increasingly arthritis-ridden Krzyzewski, who had terrible injuries during World War I and was experiencing growing pain and immobility. She was basically a large part of her duties was to basically be Alfred's occupational physical therapist, to the extent of sometimes having to help him put on his clothes and other things. After Krzyzewski's death, Charlotte worked for and with the Institute until her own death in 2002. And as Steve mentioned, she fulfilled many roles. I'll just go over some of these more specifically. She was the secretary of the Board of Trustees for many, many years, a number of decades, from 1950 until just a few years before her death. Literary executor of the Krzyzewski Literary Estate. She was the executor of Krzyzewski's will, the director of the Institute, editor of General Semantics Bulletin, the IGS Seminar Workshop administrator, respected GS writer, historian, etc. As a teacher, she focused primarily on the nonverbal aspects of general semantics training. First teaching Krzyzewski's neurosemantic relaxation technique, and then later applying the sensory awareness work of Charlotte Selberg to help people extensionalize themselves through silent level practice. And this work is now considered an essential part of general semantics extensional training.
A number of you here have attended seminars that Charlotte taught at. So I think you'll recognize when I say, Charlotte, with her sensory awareness. She was a very, very gentle person. She spoke quietly, and she was also very, very forceful. In her quiet voice, if she asked you to do something, you did it. In fact, you did. She chose to refer to her work as experiments as opposed to exercises. We're used to hearing exercises. But exercises for her implied effort, and that was not at all what she was going for. She was going for us being able to be more fully present, to experience with our senses and the sense of our own movement and so forth what was going on. And so she would ask questions like, what are you noticing? What can you notice? And we did this with hearing, we did it tactily, we were known as those crazy seminarians, use that word, who hug the trees in the morning. So it was a lot of fun, but it was also just a wonderful, wonderful learning experience. I think just about everybody looked forward, almost everybody, I know a couple of people actually didn't like it, but looked forward to her sessions. Not only for what we learned, but because the rest we done. A lot of it was done on the floor. I was not inclined to fall asleep here, I would say, but there were many times when snores reverberated around the room. And she didn't get upset. She was very, very accepting, as she was in a lot of things. If she had a very, to me, familiar eye roll, accepting with this eye roll, like, I have seen it all. This is just fine. She was also very playful. And one after hours evening, we were a place where we could have dancing. I don't know, some others of you were there that summer. And there were some decorations, rooms and things. And she was dancing. I stepped out for a minute, and then I came back. And Charlotte looked different. And why she looked different was she had put down two balloons. She was very thin and slight. Two balloons, put them down her blouse, and she was dancing. And it was really quite a sight. She was quite old by that time. And she loved to dance. One time we were at a seminar where we were near a pond, somebody's property who was related. And Milton Dawes, who couldn't be here tonight, was drumming. And Charlotte just got up, and she stood in her leg, she faced the people, and she danced. And she danced for half an hour. And everybody was just in trance at her moving. And then to get a little different side of Charlotte, we used to have a talent show, or, when I was doing stuff, I called it a behavior show. And so if you guys come up with the idea of doing a sensory awareness session with someone playing Charlotte and mocking the whole process. Do you remember you there, Andrew? Remember that? Yeah. Well, nobody could play Charlotte. How do you do that? So we spoke to Charlotte about it. And Charlotte played Charlotte. And she did all of the mocking stuff that we would have done, making fun of herself.
In 1953, Charlotte became known as Charlotte Schuchart Reed because she got married to Alan Walker Reed. Given the sum total of her achievements, I feel safe in saying that Charlotte contributed more than any other person I know to the survival of the Institute into the 21st century, and thus to the continuation of Krajewski's work. And I feel confident that Alan, devoted as he was to Charlotte, would not feel the slightest bit of jealousy at that statement. It also seems clear to me that Charlotte would not have been able to do what she did without the support of her beloved Alan, who was a professor for many years in the Department of English at Columbia University. And by providing Charlotte the means to continue to devote herself to her general semantics work through the Institute and through his own teaching, writing, and other assistance, Alan contributed more than almost anyone other than Charlotte to the continuation of the Institute to today.
So now we'll look at Alan and Charlotte and their relationship together. They were a very, very romantic couple. They loved to dance together. They hiked. They went swimming. When Alan would be coming up to the seminars, he would come for a few days of our 2-week seminar every year. We know that Charlotte always looked lovely to me. She couldn't not look lovely, but she would get more dressed up. She would put it up. She would take more care of her hair. Very, very romantic. And one time we were, I'll hold that. They could get very angry at each other. I mean, who can't at their spouse? People get very angry. But their arguments were such models of disagreement. They were very, very vigorous and always polite. And it was just wonderful to see. Charlotte used to worry about Alan's eating, and I would hear about it because we'd be at the seminars together and Alan home alone for 2 weeks. She would prepare and she would have everything in the house, but she knew very well that Alan would be eating ice cream and drinking milkshakes because he just loved ice cream. And so she would be worried about his health and so forth. And near the end, I think it must have been after Charlotte died, but Bob Gould would come up from Baltimore, and he would take Alan and his health aide out for a little outing, and they would drive to New Jersey. And I'm sure that Alan enjoyed the scenery and the change of scene from his apartment. But perhaps what he most enjoyed were the chocolate milkshakes that they would stop in New Jersey diners for this milkshake. So they were just a marvelous couple together.
Alan was born in Minnesota in 1906. He grew up in Iowa, where his father worked as the one-man science faculty of the Iowa State Teachers College at Cedar Falls. With the love of the English language, which was inspired by H.L. Mencken's The American Language, Alan decided to take up an academic career in English, but he did it in a slightly unusual way for the 1920s, which was to study English as a scientist. Alan received a bachelor's degree from Iowa State in 1925 and a master's in English from the University of Iowa in 1926. He then taught English at the University of Missouri, or Missouri, but I think that's how they pronounce it. Awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, Alan studied at Oxford University from 1928 to 1932, where he specialized in descriptive linguistics and lexicography, which is the making of dictionaries. His scientific attitude and down-to-earth interest in how people talk had already led him in the late 1920s to collect material, such as men's room graffiti, that others did not consider suitable for academic study. And the resulting book of nasty words was published, was entitled Lexical Evidence, we have it here, Lexical Evidence from Folk Epigraphy in Western North America, a glossarial study of the low element in the English vocabulary. vocabulary. Circulation restricted to students of linguistics, folklore, abnormal psychology, and allied branches of social sciences. And he had, in 1935, he had to have this privately printed in Paris. Luckily, Maledicta Press in 1977, I believe, reprinted it in paperback as classic American graffiti, and it made, hopefully it's still in print or you can get it somewhere in a bookstore, but we have it here. In 1932, Allen became a research associate in English at the University of Chicago, where he worked on the editorial staff of the Dictionary of American English. Allen's unorthodox at the time scientific approach of studying how people use language eventually led him to GS in 1936, when Allen began reading Science and Sanity and attending lectures by Kodishes.
Allen had a very unique style at the seminars. He prepared very, very carefully. He had a written out talk. He was not at all casual about any of his work. So he would come up and he would have a stack of papers to give to people, and sometimes reprints of other things that he had produced for him.